Welcome to the Film Board, part of the Next Reel family of film podcasts here on True Story FM. On this episode, we are talking about Joe Penna's, aka Mystery Guitar Man's, new science fiction film starring Anna Kendrick, Toni Collette, Dae Kim, and Shamier Anderson. It is Stowaway.
Did we take
No, hey, sit down.
Did we take off?
Sit down or you're gonna pass out. Commander!
Take off.
Commander!
Take off.
Michael, I'm Zoe. I'm a doctor. I want you to focus on slowing down your breathing. In through your nose, out through your mouth.
Hi, Michael. I'm Marina Barnett, the commander of the ship. Do you remember what happened on the pad?
I'm a launch support engineer, ma'am. How long was I out?
We took off about 12 hours ago.
12 hours. I need to get back to my sister, please. My sister, she's alone. Please, I gotta get back.
We're not going back.
What do you mean we're not going back? This is a 2-year mission.
2 years is a long time to be away, but this is the opportunity of a lifetime.
I can learn fast.
Ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
We are taking the first steps to being able to call Mars a second home.
We're sorry that you missed the filet mignon, but this is the next best thing. We think it's spaghetti.
I should warn you now that Zoe thinks she's the in-flight entertainment.
There's no easy way to say this. Life support is damaged permanently. We only have enough oxygen aboard for 3 people.
Everyone on board will suffocate before we ever make it to Mars.
Hey, Ava, I gotta face the fact that I'm not gonna be there with you.
This research is years of our lives. Are we sure we want to throw it all away?
How much time do we have before it's too late?
20 days.
I think we should put ourselves at risk.
For their sanity, they need to try this.
This is hopeless.
That is it.
There's no way for all of us to survive.
It's imperative that we try.
My name is Andy Nelson, host of The Next Reel, and today I'm joined by several other voices in the Next Reel family to get their thoughts on this movie so we can share them with all of you. Tommy Metz III.
It is a pleasure to be here, and thank goodness just we have official confirmation that space is the worst all the time.
Absolutely, 100%.
Space can go screw. Okay.
That's right. And Jordan Peterson.
I'm Jordan Peterson, but not that Jordan Peterson. Also,
the other one.
I'm the other Jordan Peterson. There's only 2 of us. One of us is famous. Guess which one? Not me. Anyway, Tommy, I didn't see your intro written down in the show notes, which makes me think that you just came up with that on the fly, and now I feel inferior. So I'm going to stop talking now.
Look what you've done, Tommy. Look what you've done. Well,
are we outing? We're also outing me by my real name instead of Tommy Handsome, which I'm 100% fine with. But this is unprecedented.
You know what? It's time to shake things up a little bit.
It's time to shake things up, and I'm just gonna. Yeah, I mean the paparazzi's already outside. It's gonna be okay.
I like that. 3rd time's the charm too. So yeah, we feel like we're with the right one.
Absolutely. Well, as we say on The Next Reel, when the movie ends, our conversation begins. So let's talk. First things, before we talk about our initial thoughts, that's usually how we kick things off, but I really want to know. So I don't know how familiar either of you are with Joe Penna, who is the director of this particular film.
No.
But he did a film before this called Arctic with Mads Mikkelsen, where he is stranded in the Arctic and he is trying to get away. And there's a helicopter that's coming to save him, I believe, and it crashes. And he has to make the decision, am I going to wait for somebody else to come, or am I just going to brave the Arctic and just try to get out of here on my own?
I didn't know he directed that because that was kind of like Gravity in snow.
Right.
Which is very interesting. Like it was a very local, like it's sort of a, oh, wow, that's interesting. Okay.
Well,
yeah.
The reason I bring this up, and this is because I find this so fascinating now that I know about this, and that also is a cast of 3 in that film.
Right.
I mean, it's a very small cast. But that film, when they put it together, it was originally intended to be set on Mars. and actually connected to this film. But he was doing that when all of a sudden The Martian came out and they realized, oh, you know what? That's exactly the same story.
Oh,
We need to change that because it would have been too much the same. And so they changed it to the Arctic. But how interesting is that this was actually meant to be the second in a series of films that Pena was doing about stories related to journeying to Mars.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
And now I really want to see Arctic, which I missed, but I was very curious about it. And I think it's because I confused it with Polar, which is Mickelson's other movie that he did about being up in the snow.
but that was like the crazy one, right?
That was the one that I think was supposed to be not as good.
Right.
Yeah, right.
It was not intended to be good.
Right.
Yeah. Did you see?
Are you sure they didn't just make Arctic like the way that they intended to on Mars, and then just like change a color filter, like to release it as Arctic?
I would love to.
Instead of red, it was white.
Right, exactly. And the bear was a big like
every time their back is turned, they go brr through terrible ADR.
Right.
It's so cold out here.
Yeah. Boy, is this not like Mars.
Spacesuit.
They had to CG out the like gas masks and everything. A lot of extra work. Went into that one. All right. Well, but we are here to talk about Stowaway, the potential second of this Mars series that Pena would have been doing. So let's start talking about our initial thoughts of the film. Tommy, let's kick it off. What do you think of this?
I didn't know much about this movie before I saw it. I knew Anna Kendrick, and I wish I didn't know the title of the movie. Because the title Stowaway, you're just sort of like, well, everyone's accounted for. Don't open that closet. Like it's sort of like tipping towards it. But overall, I really enjoyed this movie. I thought it was at times extremely economical. It was very small in scope, in the morality play that it is, but then also managed to have this. I've never known how to say this word. It's a fancy word, brava. It means like, whoa, sequence, bravois. Has anyone heard this word?
I think you're making it up, but I'm willing to accept it.
Okay. BRAUVUA. It's something like that.
Bravura?
It's this. Is that how it's pronounced?
I'm pretty sure you're meaning bravura.
Oh, no. I tried to make
or
it
bravura, yeah.
Bravo. Okay, let's take it from the top. Hey,
but
everybody.
Like bravois.
Welcome to the
Bravois. I think I wanted to call it like that. Bravois. This, once they finally leave the ship, it is this, I was just on the edge of my seat the whole time with how scary it was when they get into the spacewalk thing. So I thought it was really well filmed. I thought it was very well acted. There's not a ton to it, but I kind of liked that about it. And I thought it was a really nice addition to how space is the worst and how scary things are presented to you.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. Jordan, what do you think?
I really, really enjoyed it as well. I think to call it economical is a great it's a great word to use. It's very true. It's an incredibly tightly written film and very small, but without feeling lazy, which I think sometimes, and space movies in particular, it can be easy to get trapped in this sort of sense of like, well, I'm just going to show how boring and isolated it feels in space. And just, you have these overlong sequences that just sort of eat up film time. Which this film didn't do. There was always forward momentum, which I really appreciated. I saw a preview. I also wish that I had known nothing going in. I also wish that it had maybe mid-named something else. But that said, no stowaways here. Yeah. It's called Only 3 Crew Members.
just the three of them.
Just the three
Mars buddies.
The 3 Mars buddies and no one else. I thought that again, to sort of riff on Tommy's comments, the morality play was really sophisticated. It was really well handled. I had my wife watch the second half of it with me because I had started it on my own and then had to finish it later. And she walked in and I said, I'll summarize what's happened up to this point. So I kind of like caught her up and then we watched together. And she's like, so wait, is nobody a bad guy? And I was like, no, nobody's a bad guy. They're actually all really wonderful people. And like, this is, the last thing I'll say is that I so appreciate a movie like this that actually, I don't think it's not science fiction. It's just fiction. Like there's nothing here that is straining the sort of known boundaries of our technology and science. And so, if, give us 2 years or whatever, like we could build that and do it. Like that could happen like right away. Like everything that they did, we have the technology for it. Every single thing that we see in this movie is possible. Not even possible. Like it's like stuff we've sort of already built already. We just haven't put it together that way yet. And so it just felt incredibly authentic, which I very, very much appreciate. I'm like, I want more and more and more movies like this, where we just see the actual kind of, possibility of what human beings can do and what we're trying to do, and kind of give us that sense of forward. My gosh, that word, forward momentum as a
Try
species.
saying bravois.
Forward, bravois.
I love what Jordan said about the fact that there's no real villain other than space itself. I know we're just in initial thoughts, but I want to touch on that more later. Andy.
Certainly. Yeah. No. And I mean, just to also follow up on what Jordan was saying, it's that was something that really captured me over the course of the film, is how authentic so much of this was feeling like. And I was kind of looking into this, and I learned that the director used YouTube video blogger, astronomy and space enthusiast Scott, quote, "Fly Safe" Manley, who actually consulted on the film, did orbital mechanics math to make sure the movie setting and plot are as scientifically accurate as possible.
Wow.
And so I was like, that's really interesting, because there were so many conversations that they were having about these scientific things that, I mean, it felt authentic. And what I really liked about it was like, this wasn't like the first mission to Mars. Like, they were already sending stuff to Mars. Like, it was already kind of something that they were in the process of exploring. This was just a trip to Mars. And I'm like, okay, so it's setting it in a place where it just feels like this is just I don't want to say a standard trip, but it certainly is just another trip. They know what they're doing. They have everything lined up. They already have sent supplies to Mars and everything. And so they're just going. And I'm like, that was actually really kind of exciting. I liked the way that was set up. I also liked how contained the whole thing was, and how we really were just on the ship with these people. And that's all we really hear from. I was a little curious where the story was going to go once our Stowaway appeared, because I was like, okay, so did he really... was he really trying to stow away on the ship? Are we going to go into thriller territory here, or is it kind of a horror to switch up? Like, where are we going with this? And the fact that it never went there, honestly, it was like almost the most straightforward way to play the story. But by doing that, it ended up being the most, for me, engaging way to play the story. I was kind of really excited that it was just such a straightforward, like, serious morality tale about how would you deal with this if this happened in this particular situation.
Not having a twist was the twist.
Yeah.
Because there's so many, apart from things like Gravity, there's so many movies where there's always, especially in quote unquote morality plays, there's always a villain. There's someone that has the space crazies, like in Sunshine or Event Horizon. If you want to do the other side, The Abyss, if you want to trade, because water is inhospitable as space. Someone always breaks down under the pressure. The lazy version of this would have been that. Of that one of them becomes, but instead, like Jordan said, they're all like great. And it was so refreshing and nice to not have someone go, we got to get in there and hit him with a hammer, a space hammer and stuff. Instead, it was like, no, let's figure this out and let's like out humane each other. It was really, and then he sold me. I had the same feeling that you did of like, wait, because also I think that was part of me having to quickly swallow. There was a person in the ship. Like at the beginning of the movie, they're like, are you a go? Go. Are you a go? Go. And none of the goes were, where's Carl? Like it just seems like that's a kind of a big pill to swallow, is that there can actually be someone in the ship hidden that no one knows is there. But if you get rid of that pretty quickly, then it really works for me. And what I was going to say is I stopped believing that he was going to be a potential problem because he acted so well in that first, when he starts having the panic attack and when his entire face crumbles and his tears leak when he says the word home. I want to go home. I was like, oh, I feel for this character as much as everyone else in this film that I've spent 20 minutes with.
I just have to ask because I'm really nervous that I missed something big. I don't know. Do we know how he ended up behind the panel?
He says when he's talking, and I should have gone back and listened to it again, because he's talking about how he was working on a particular part and something happened, and that was like the last thing that he remembers. And I didn't check that.
They blur over it really quickly.
Yeah.
It's as if the film kind of, maybe that's the best way to handle it. The film's a little self-conscious about like, and then look over here.
Yeah, right.
Because that's crazy that he's behind, just because it takes so much.
Yeah. Like, how do you get a person, like, I was just like, and that if I had like frankly, if I had one major complaint about this movie, it would be, I don't know how that happened. I cannot imagine how that could possibly happen. Like, it's such a huge conceit that I like really wanted, I was like thirsty for somebody to just like give me a little bit of like a possible scenario. Like, how could this have happened? Like, it just doesn't make any sense. Like, you know how NASA works? Like, it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
That's what I said. Yeah, go for Carl. I exactly. No, they spent more time seeming to know that we were looking for a turn, because in ADR that you hear Anna Kendrick's character say, it really seems like he's here by accident.
Yeah.
I don't think there's anything wrong. They're dealing with the potential space crazy instead of he fell asleep. What is he, Goldilocks? Space Goldilocks?
But also somebody had to like bolt in the panel like while he was sleeping. Like, was that person also sleeping? Like, somebody, like, how, like, was there a robot that was doing this and he just got knocked out and he's like in the thing, and then the robot's like, just doing my job, like screwing the panel in, and it felt like, the thing is, I feel like somewhere in the story room, somebody had a pretty good idea for how that could have happened. Like, it's not like they say, and then he's in the panel, and no one ever, like, we shall not mention any way, I mean, like, somebody had a decent idea. I'm like, just share one of them with us. Like, as a conjecture, like, he doesn't remember anything, but maybe this happened. I don't know. I don't know. It was one of those things that so this is the larger point for me, is that I never want to be I never want to be trying to solve a problem that the movie doesn't want me to try to solve while the movie is doing other things that are important. Because it's like, I may still be paying attention and whatever, but like, if part of my brain is occupied trying to solve that problem, I am being robbed of my experience of the rest of the movie in some small way, because that bandwidth should not be taken up by that question. So that's 100%. The reason that I kind of like strain at that a little bit. No,
and that's actually really interesting, because it certainly is a point that, like I said, I know that they talk about it, but but they do go through it very quickly, to the point where
he slipped and fell and then passed out. That's kind of, if I remember correctly, but you're right. He's behind a panel.
You're right. So unless there was another way in, I mean, perhaps there was a way in, and this would make sense, right? There's a way in from the outside of the ship. He went in there and was doing it. He slipped and fell and was knocked unconscious. Somebody else saw that open panel outside the ship and shut it. Oh,
there was that part when he was talking about stripping away to make room for the third person because it was for two. That maybe
but this is not a conversation we should be having.
No, it's not. Right. It's not.
And I think I'm like, you're saying this, I'm like, oh, that's a great idea. Why wasn't it in the movie? It's just like somebody should have, like, because it wouldn't have cost that much. It would have cost 2 minutes of them trying to figure out, like, troubleshoot how this could have happened for him.
Or perhaps the problem is, because I know they talk about it, perhaps it is in there and it's covered so fast in like this quick conversation that we end up missing it, and because of that it ends up being this big problematic thing where, like, people are dwelling on this, like, well, how did he get in there in the first place? Like, it makes no sense, because it is like, that has to be explained in order for us to buy into the whole conceit of this film.
Yeah, well, and it makes me suspect that they wanted to introduce the tension of him potentially being a space crazy, because and which is why we get that line from Zoe, who says, I really think it was by accident. It's like, I would have much preferred for them to essentially remain contiguous with the rest of what the movie is doing, which is saying, listen, there's no space crazies, like, they're all good people. Like, just don't bait and switch me. Don't red herring me. Like, I don't need that. Like, I'm not here for that. Right. Like, so, it wasn't really effective for me to, wonder. I mean, his reaction, like you said, his acting, like when he came out of the thing, it's like, it was so profoundly convincing that you're not like, you don't need the sort of, ooh, maybe he's a crazy saboteur. Like, no, he's not, So then what the interesting question is not whether or not he's crazy and going to kill everybody. The interesting question is, how did he get there? And so that's the one that I want them to answer, so I don't have to spend the rest of the movie wondering about it.
That is an interesting point, though, because you brought up the idea of like, the whole of idea of being a space crazy. But part of me was like, well, is it just that he's like such a fanboy, and because he's an engineer, he's training to do this sort of thing? Could it be like, and he has a sick sister to boot? So my thinking immediately went to, especially because Hyperion, the company that's funding all of this, as soon as they realize what's happened and that he has this sick sister that he's left behind, that he's taking care of and stuff, they go in, they step in, they're fully taking care of her now. And they say, we're going to make sure that she's taken care of the whole time. You don't have to worry about any of this. And I'm like, okay, so is that part of his plan? Like, did he jump on here because he thought that they would take care of his sister because he couldn't anymore, and now he's working with his it seems like his idol in David, who he really fawns over, as like, maybe that's the angle that we're going here. But of course,
is he like Max from Space Camp? Like, he's not there to ruin them, but through Jinx's help, he was sent into space. But I mean, but if it helps at all, I mean, and if because that didn't bother me that much.
Yeah.
I was able to swallow it and be like, okay. And they've made it pretty clear that he's not that. And so that didn't bother me too much, but but to Jordan's point, I did have to swallow that quibble and be like, I'm not going to think about this anymore because this film already has other interesting things to say.
Right. It's a pill you're able to swallow. It just kind of scratches on the way down a little bit.
Some would say jagged. Oh, isn't that ironic? Okay.
All right. So let's go back to this whole idea of the way the story is constructed. And it is such this contained story inside this spaceship. And also just another point, it's not like an Apollo 13 sort of ship where they're floating around. Like it's on this space station that's doing the whole gyroscopic spin to kind of create an artificial gravity. So essentially we're looking at them inside this ship that is, I mean, it's the set. And I thought it was very effective. I mean, what did you two think of the way that they constructed the closed sense of this story?
Gorgeous. Just gorgeous. I'm such a nerd, man. I was just like, I mean, it was kibble, man. I was just like eating it. I loved it so much. I mean, when they docked with the MTS station and they had this, when they started to rotate and like you could see the thing just like starting to spin and then they had the tether come, I was like, yes, 1,000 times yes. I was so in it. I loved it so much. And I did love that the whole thing, the entire movie from start to finish was entirely contained within the space of that vehicle. It was great.
I appreciated the conceit of like creating gravity instead of having them float around the whole time, because it again let us focus on the morality play. This is a lifeboat. This is not space. This is a lifeboat problem. This is the trolley problem. I mean, this is an ethical morality question that has been around for forever. So have it be in space and have the space scaries there. But then when it has to do with the real human stuff, have them walk around.
I'm gonna push on you a little bit, actually, because I think this is very much about space. Like it is. You're right. It is lifeboat. It is a morality tale, but it's like there's a shrewd recognition that any venture along this line would be that. Like there's, one little thing goes wrong and like you have this horrible decision that you have to make, and you don't need a space crazy person to like put you into the worst possible scenario. And like the fact that, there was gravity. Yes, it like helped it not be distracting like Apollo 13, but also once again, realistic. If you're going to spend that much time in transit, if you want to not have severe medical problems months down the road, you need gravity. So, I mean, this is all this stuff. And I love that the way that the thing is constructed is that they use the empty fuselage of the booster rocket to like be the counterweight. I mean, so brilliant. Like it's such an incredibly well thought out thing. It's like, this is, I mean, I feel like I felt like I was reading a prospectus of this mission. Like, I mean, it was really, really well considered.
That was something that was so exciting, the way that they designed this station. And I think that goes to some of the research they did, I'm assuming, because it just felt so authentic. The way that they're using the pieces they have this, what they call it the Kingfisher, the back end of the rocket that kind of comes around to act as the counterweight, and the way that the whole thing pulls apart, and then you have those sails in the middle, in between. And then later in the film, when they're moving between from one side to the other, I was just like, that was, for me, one of the most thrilling parts of the film, just seeing
and the change in the gravity.
Yeah. And just seeing how that came together. I'm like, that was, it was endlessly amazing just watching those parts.
It makes, what Jordan said does make a lot of sense when I said that it takes away the space, that it was a wrong way to say it. What adding the gravity inside helped humanize and normalize the morality inside just enough, to accentuate it when you don't have that outside for the thrill ride of the spacewalk, but then also to be able to have two people sit next to each other and start like tearing up, trying to explain what to do with this impossible problem. It makes the abnormal a little bit normalized just enough to be able to focus on stuff instead of like, oh, I sneezed and now there's bubbles everywhere because space is the worst.
Yeah. How do you sneeze, Tommy? There's bubbles everywhere.
There's bubbles everywhere.
That's after he eats his Tide Pods.
Yeah, what have you been doing?
Well, what I think is so interesting to that point is that it's brought up several times throughout the film, is just like how little there is between them and space. Like there's the part where they're working on the wall or panels behind the wall, and Zoe is looking at kind of the other side, and she's like, I forget how little there is between us and space out there. And I think that speaks a lot to just kind of the constant danger that they're essentially in because of this environment that they're the world that they're in, of just being in space and just all of those things. And they bring up a lot of things like the solar flares and just potential things that could happen, and we get some of them as payoffs and stuff. And but I find it really interesting, just like constant reminders of how absolutely dangerous any of this sort of thing really is.
Can we talk about the solar flare for a second? Because, well, first of all, I want to just second everything you guys are saying about everything you guys are saying, because like the spacewalk sequence was just, man, there sometimes in a movie, I get so like tense that I start internally begging the movie to be gentle with me.
I started looking away from, like, I would wonder if seeing this in a theater might be, and maybe it's because, you've become a little desensitized or oversensitized because we've been away from it. But that was so intense. I was on my couch with my dog in my lap, but I was like, oh no!
I found myself wanting to turn away. And my wife is pregnant. Which we're just now announcing. So some of your listeners are hearing this before some of the members of our family. So that's funny.
What a scoop!
Right there you go.
You heard it here first, folks.
So she's a couple months in, and so she's got she's nauseous a lot of the time. And I was like, honey, are you okay with this? And she was like having to like turn away and like making sounds. She's like, I can't. She's like, he just better not throw up inside his helmet.
Oh, you're lucky you didn't show her the first half when Dae Kim was like having that hard time with the launch. And then as soon as they turn the thing in, or they start spinning the ship, like once they get everything set up with the thing, and you get that constant rotation out the windows of all the stars, like I was feeling nauseated, watching all of that. I'm like, oh, please shut those windows. I can't look at this anymore.
It's giving me like bodily anxiety.
Yeah.
It's like so good.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you guys about, speaking of, once again, the solar flare sequence, which I thought was really a brilliant setup, a brilliant payoff. Once again, very, very authentic.
The solar flare sequence being, hey, we've got to get back. We're out of time.
Yes. Okay, and then when Zoe has to, ultimately, spoilers, decide.
Those are also solar flares. Those, the green stuff is solar flares.
The green stuff. Right. So this is what I'm wondering is, I get the need to do that like visually maybe, but like I kind of wish they hadn't. I kind of wish they hadn't, because like I don't think it's real. I could be wrong. I'd love to like do some reading on it. I don't
like
think
that you would see visual flares.
Yeah, you're not.
You
I don't
mean?
think you're going to see it. I don't think you're going to see the radiation. I think it's something that just like it's gamma and it's X-rays. It's like,
can I expand on what you're saying?
Yes,
because this is what it's described as. Now it's Wikipedia, but they describe it as, and I'll tell you, reading through the Wikipedia plot synopsis, it's very technical. Like there are a lot of things in here, like it sounds like NASA code, but they call. Much. I know, it's really fantastic. It's called a CME. High energy solar flare. And a CME is a coronal mass ejection, which is a significant release of plasma and accompanying magnetic field from the solar corona. So
that's how I would have said it. Yeah.
Right. So it's actually, so there is this other stuff that's actually coming out too. So I guess that
I would want to consult a scientist about whether it would be visible. And the fact that it was visible around the sort of their main part of their ship, that sort of I don't know what would NASA call it? I don't know, the thing they live on anyway. Around that main sort of hull, and space then when car. She went around the space car, and then when she got up onto the tether, you didn't see it anymore. And so I was wondering, like, what are the dynamics around this? And the reason I bring that up is because and I'm more of a nerd, so I think most people are just going to kind of take it in stride, like, yeah, there's the solar flare, it's hitting them, and there's a bunch of radiation, you can see it, it's killing her, which is awful. I'm sitting there wondering if you would actually see it, and I feel there's a lot more of like the horror element to me if you know that when you walk past a certain point, you're just going to start dying, and you don't get to see what's doing it. And then you can maybe see
more of a Chernobyl.
Yes. P.S. Chernobyl. My gosh, did they do it right?
Yeah,
in like fantastic. Every scene. Like,
but even Chernobyl, they made sure that you heard that.
Yeah. I mean, the sound effect thing was very.
But I mean, I didn't bring that up to. I brought that up to be like, do you maybe need some of that to really ratchet up? To have it be tangible is not the right word, but identifiable enough. If you don't see it, we always use radiation. You always have that sound.
You've got
just sort of walks through.
So what's interesting to me is, and this is, and once again, I feel bad. I feel kind of bad about talking about this or about positing these ideas, because I'm not sure. Maybe it is authentic, maybe like that would happen, and I would love to know, because if it did, I'd be like, that's sick, that's awesome, like I'm so glad they did that. But if it's not real, if they were, essentially what I'm saying is this movie was not pandering to us at any point in the story, and if they chose to start pandering there, I wish you hadn't, because you can sell the danger, you can sell the peril, you can sell the horror of that situation without pandering. Like, you don't need to pander. All you have to do is set it up the right way. You have to say, like, for instance, the captain says, hey, or the commander says, hey, like, whatever. She can explain it, like, easily. She could, like, you're not going to see it. It'll just kill you. Like, you'll slowly deteriorate under a constant barrage of radiation that you cannot see or hear or smell or taste. It's just happening, and you'll die.
A terrible pep talk.
which is awful. But like I think that would have been so much more kind of effective and less pandery. Instead, it's like, oh, it's beautiful. Too bad it's deadly. I mean, I feel like we've seen that. We've seen that kind of thing before. It felt a little extra to me.
Would you have felt that in most movies, or because this one was so seemingly meticulous?
Job. Yes, that's my point. Okay. It did such a good job of being so careful with all those details. And I'm saying, don't let that be the moment that you decide to start playing down to your audience and not respecting them enough to let them experience that as it would really be.
Absolutely.
And once again, I could be wrong. Maybe it would happen. Maybe something.
To Jordan's point, they say the acronym CDRA 900 times, and it's about an hour later when we finally learn that it scrubs, that it's carbon dioxide removal assembly. Exactly. I'd already looked it up because I was at home.
Yeah, you're like, what? Well, I don't know the scientific accuracy of any, like the CME, like all of the way that these radiation from the solar flares actually work. But it does say when it's this particular CME type, there's a lot of matter that is also kind of ejected with the radiation. So it's possible that this is what it looked like. I really don't know. But I totally see your point. I think that's a very valid point based on all of this, because again, the film is doing such a good job of being so I don't know, just putting it in such a realistic sense of the way that everything is happening, the way that we're experiencing the story. It all feels like authentic, and I would hate to think that that's, like you said, that's where they decided to kind of
stop trusting the audience.
Exactly,
that's what it comes down to. Yeah,
because I mean, I think as she goes, and who knows, but I think seeing her as her skin is starting to kind of go through the motions of falling apart due to the radiation, I think that may have been enough, but yeah,
it would have been. I promise you, if her increased fatigue and like her like kind of gasping at the ongoing suffering that you're experiencing, and like, you know, anyway, I'll stop. Because the thing is that like,
well, I
loved that sequence. Yeah. I loved that sequence. And I mean, her performance was, Anna Kendrick just like, she blew it out of the water. It was so good. It was so good. And Toni Collette, like I keep thinking about that moment. That moment keeps coming back to me, just like her line where she says, when they're saying, well, how long can this last? You know, they're thinking, well, we could go back out and get this extra oxygen tank. And they're trying to figure it out. And she's like, hours. And you feel the despair, the horror, the knowledge that this is just like, it's all falling apart. And it's just such a beautiful sequence, such great performances. I'm a nitpicker sometimes, and I don't want to let that get in the way of like the overwhelming appreciation I had for this movie in almost every respect. And that sequence as well, and especially, was so good in pretty much every way.
How nice was it to see Toni Collette playing an Australian again after all these years? It's like, I was like, was it Muriel's Wedding? Was that the last time that I heard her using her original accent? I don't know, but no, she was great. The moment for me, it was like, I think just moments after that. And it's when she's saying to Anna Kendrick, she's like, you know, I would do it if I could, or she says something like that. I wish I could do it, because she can't. She's the captain of the ship. She's not the one who can go on this mission. And that played so authentically. Like Michael offered himself up. He said, I'll do it. And they're like, you can't, you don't have the training for it. If you fail, that means one of us is going to die. So it has to be either Zoe or David. And like, that, I don't know. I found that to be a really interesting way to play that, because, and I put this in the
David
notes.
being Daniel Dae Kim, just reminding people about,
but and I put this in the notes because, you know, I was being a little cheeky, but the whole idea of like, they could have made this a film that has a strong ending by having Michael, the stowaway, be the one who's like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to save all of you because I shouldn't have been here. And he's the one who goes out and secures the oxygen so that they can all live. Like, that's totally like a Hollywood way to end this film. And they don't do that. They do it in the most realistic way possible.
I was going to say, I thought that they were starting to make a real play that David has a number of scenes where he's like, all of my reason for being here is gone. Yeah. Right? Of like, he's like, my chlorophyll is gone. Everything's gone. I was wondering if they were going to go that way.
Yeah. And he's the one that introduces the way out, the suicide plan.
Right. Exactly.
But he had a wife, and I was like, there's no way they're going to let him do it.
I mean, I think that here's the thing. I think that the Hollywood way would have been to have David do it, because he's the one who comes in and gives him the way out, the suicide way out. So he needs a redemption moment, right? Like, he was not fighting for the extra time. He was not fighting for the solution. And so to have him be the one that doesn't sacrifice himself, not because he doesn't want to by that point, but because he literally can't, is a really beautiful way to handle that story. Really, really beautiful.
That's right. It's not a redemption story. None of this is, except even Andrew Kendrick's story is not a redemption story. It makes it makes a clear line of her personal empathy and morality in her stance is she cannot let this happen.
And it's really great because life isn't about redemption. Life is about love and meaning. And you don't get to choose what happens. You don't get to choose how things play out. You just do the absolute best you can with what you have in the given circumstance. You have to just deal with it, whatever it is. And what I love that this movie doesn't lead with theme. It doesn't have like an agenda. It's telling a humanism story, which
nice.
I love so much because it's not,
it's very personal.
So it's like in the morality calculus of storytelling, you could make a case for any one of them doing the thing, like sacrificing themselves, whatever. It seems like the rules of the universe that were constructed around this movie necessitated ultimately that Zoe be the one to go sacrifice herself. And it also feels like the most authentic choice. It feels like the thing that had to have happened ultimately. And it also, because it's sort of real life and because it's authentic and because of the character that we see in Zoe, what am I trying to say? It feels very earned. It feels the most meaningful. I mean, like her monologue, her story about the guy on the beach
being the lifeguard.
Yeah. Was just a knockout. Like that was so good.
Yeah.
It was so good. And going out there to save that guy, getting there, not having barely any energy for him when she got there, holding on to him anyway, knowing she was running out of energy. And then the key moment, right? I mean, the key moment, and you can see it coming. So it's not like this gosh, wow moment, but like, it doesn't matter because it is the essential beauty of this movie is that she says she didn't know. She didn't know there was anybody coming. She just could not have lived with herself if she had not exerted that effort. And it's not the thing isn't about like, hey, God exists. And I mean, I am a believer, but like, I also don't really believe much in an interventionist God. I think things just happen and you just deal with it. And the whole point is to learn. The whole point is to like learn who you are, to connect to other people, to learn to love people, and to whatever your set of values and virtues is, to be totally, have total integrity about that. And so at the end of the movie, she doesn't prove that things will just work out by putting herself out there and then surviving anyway. She says, I'm going to die, but this is still the right decision. It was the right decision then, and it's the right decision now. Then I got lucky. It was great. Somebody was there. Amazing. But that's not why I went out. I didn't go out there believing like, oh, somebody's going to save me eventually. I went out there because it was the right thing to do. There was no other question to answer.
No, I love that because I thought that the lazier and more Hollywood version of that would have been she was about to go out there, but she knew that the jet streams were too strong, so I couldn't do it. And I've regretted it ever since. And now I have a clear redemption path, and now I have survivor's remorse, all that. Instead, this is a more layered situation of she just went out there kind of on a leap of morality faith.
Yeah.
Which is just better than
it's so much better the way that they build that. My question for both of you now, because I think we're all in agreement about this, do we need that last bit of voiceover at the end? The last thing we hear is her voice kicking in. I applied to the HARP program because I thought it would be a funny story to get rejected by Hyperion, but now I realize that this was one of those rare opportunities that could truly give my life meaning beyond anything I could imagine.
It was a bad line the first time. It was a bad line at the end. And it didn't totally kill it for me, but like, yeah, we absolutely didn't need it. And in almost every case, when there's voiceover, there doesn't need to be voiceover. Like in almost every case, especially anyway. Yeah, man.
They really shocked me that kicked in. All of a sudden, I'm like, where did this come? We haven't had this throughout the film, and all of a sudden we're getting this.
100% unnecessary. Yeah.
But we're us. I mean, just speaking, we're us. And for a lot of people, her just sort of like slowly wheezing out while admittedly staring at something beautiful is a real downer. And you need to give people, if you're going to try to give people a little bit of a pat on the back or a happy boost. While I don't exactly like the writing, it's a more elegant way to do it than to flash back to Earth and we have like a big Anna Kendrick parade or like a bunch of or even like a bunch of like slow-mos of like times that they were laughing in the ship and stuff, intermixed with her sort of looking at the stuff. There's a lot of grosser ways to go about it.
Oh, for sure. But but once again, like, I'm going to go back to that same comment. Like, predominantly throughout the movie, we weren't pandered to.
So it makes it even stick out even more.
Yeah,
exactly.
It's like, well, why now, guys? Why now? And I it's Netflix. So Netflix famously gives their creators a lot of room to do what they want to do. And so, if this had been another movie, if it had been another studio that did this movie, I would have blamed an executive. I would have been said, somebody during a test screening said, it's too depressing. You got to put something in there give people something at the end. But I don't think anybody did that. Maybe they did. But like, I think it's more likely that it was a bit of a creative misstep. They lost the faith in their audience for just a second. They were like, are they just going to feel like this is a downer? Because it's not. I better put this in there. And which is why it was probably written to begin with, right?
Sure.
Like, it was like the reason it was bad writing in there is because they wanted that line in the end, at which, my gosh, give my life meaning. Come on, like, kill me. Like, no, don't say that. Humans don't say that. No.
My mama always said stowaways are the best of us. And you're like, what? Where are you from?
It's funny that you bring up the whole idea of like test screenings, because when I heard that, I'm like, God, did they play this for a test audience and they were just too depressed at the ending, so they put this in here? So it's funny that you bring up the whole idea with Netflix and everything, because you're right, and because with COVID and everything, it's very likely that they didn't have any test audiences. So who knows? I mean, it could have been Anna Kendrick. She might have wanted something. I don't know if you both noticed, but I mean, aside from the ridiculously long list of producers involved in the film, she was an executive producer on the film too. So it's possible that was something that she was pushing for her character. Who knows? I just don't know. I was disappointed that they put that in there. I felt like that we really didn't need it by that point.
Regardless of whose fault it is, it was a bad decision. Just it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whose fault. You know what I'm reminded of, and I think this is the last space movie that I was one of the last space movies that I was really, really excited for was Ad Astra, like from the previews.
Sure.
And then I went and saw it, and it was utterly, completely wall to wall ruined by narration. Like, absolutely devastated by narration. Like, I promise you with my entire confidence that if you took a cut of that movie and stripped away all of the voiceover narration, just made that one single change, that movie would be 10 times better. And you would lose nothing.
I don't know I know we did it as a film board episode back when we did it. Can't remember. I don't think I was on it, but I don't know the story of it, but I know it was a space version of whatchamacallit, the Apocalypse Now story, Hearts of Darkness. Mm-hmm. And so, which I believe, at least I know in the Coppola version, there's a lot of narration too. And I don't know if the book has a lot of narration. So I wondered if they went that way because of that. I don't know.
I saw the movie and I was on that episode, and we did bring that up.
Yeah.
It felt, I like what you just said about the Hearts of Darkness thing, but it didn't feel that. It felt like we have to explain all of the inner thoughts.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Of Brad Pitt. And he might as well have just said space daddy issues over and over again. Yeah.
So I got a question for you both. Just a small shift. There was a point that was brought up.
Questions, Tommy. I don't know what your problem is.
Yeah,
that makes one of us.
There you go. There was a conversation that Daniel Dae Kim's character had with Michael, Shamier Anderson's character, when he was kind of getting him set up to start helping with all the microgreens and everything as they were growing everything, and he's playing his jazz music, and they have this conversation.
Space jazz. That's right.
Yeah, it's a great conversation. I really enjoyed how it's going,
Tommy. It's just jazz.
But
everything in space is automatically space anything. Did you see that one?
Jazz.
Did you see the one with their space chopsticks?
Well, the whole thing about this though was I was like, it felt like they were setting us up for a theme, right? I mean, Michael's talking about it just sounds like chaos, and David was talking about it as this form of pure expression. They each kind of do their own thing, but then it always comes back and finds the balance. And I don't know, maybe it's just a thing that bothered me, but I was like, I feel like they're introducing this because it feels like this was a great setup, and now we're going to see how when they're thrust into this situation with this extra person on the ship, it's going to turn into like jazz on the ship. They're all going to figure out how to do their own special thing and find balance and everything. And it's one of those things I'm probably reading into it far more than I should, but it stuck out to me.
It might have been helpful if at one point, you could hear him saying that thing again, while other things were happening so that you knew.
Yeah.
It actually worked for me, Andy, because it was, if you sort of squint your eyes and turn your head a little bit, and I'm not joking, it is a little bit of what goes on in the morality play in the ship. Like they are thrown, it seems like chaos. Mm-hmm. There's a stowaway. How can that ever possibly happen? Everyone has certain strengths. And then sometimes they go off and do their own thing that only they are able to do. And then ultimately balance is found. Yeah. That's kind of a way to explain from a very macro view of what the film does. Every character has their own things that they need to do. Without one of them, everything else sort of maybe falls apart. And then there's just certain times when you have to be on a solo spacewalk, or you have to do a jazz space thing. I'm starting to get uncomfortable.
I was with you.
No, but I think that's what it is. That's what humanity in strife situations is.
Yeah.
It's everyone trying to play their part, and then balance was ultimately restored in the best way that it could, with everyone doing the one thing that they were the best at or had to do.
Yeah. And I think I love what you said about, it being, if we're talking about genuine, like human real life morality plays, which everybody's life is a morality play, right? That's how it works. People are going to do what they do. You can't plan it. You can't expect it. You can't. I mean, it's not written down. It's not written down. Nothing's written down. Right. This is probably the best thing about I love that being an allegory for the story or a metaphor or whatever, because jazz, what is jazz? Jazz is music that's not written down.
Yeah.
Correct.
And in this story, everything
very
is
collaborative.
Down. Yeah,
right.
Ultimately,
nothing's written down, and also you don't always succeed. It's not like every single note's right. Everything lands, everything's perfect. It's like, no, you just you try to figure it out. You hit some, you don't hit some, and you keep going. And in this story, everything was very written out, right? I mean, it's a NASA trip to Mars. Like every line is written out. But then, of course, you get out there, and then we now have we have this curveball, and suddenly nothing is written anymore. So it turns the entire thing. It goes from being a symphony to a jazz concert. It's like, I think that's great.
That's good. I like that. Yeah.
If one of the members did become a villain because he got the space crazies, like we talked about before, it would be like a drum solo that goes on way too long. Or it would be the opposite of balance. Like it would be like someone comes in and is like, now it's time for the oboe to shine. And it was like, oh no one cares for oboe Bill. But instead it did find its own balance again.
I want a shirt that says nobody cares for Oboe Bill. That's too good.
Oboe Bill ruins everything.
Oboe Bill's the worst.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, all right. Well, so what else do you two want to talk about? I mean, the performances. I mean, great performances here. Direction. Is there anything else that either of you want to call out specifically?
One more quick note just about the economy of this screenplay. I really loved the moment when, and this is kind of harking back to earlier conversations. I feel a little embarrassed when I bring stuff like this up because it's not that important, but I just geek out about it. The as they're during the launch sequence, there's an engine inefficiency or something, right? And they're like, oh no, are we going to be able to make it to the MTS? And it's like, and she's got her hand on the launch button. Once again, this is
the abort button, right?
Yeah, and this is an illustration of how everything is so written, right? Like she's prepared to abort because there is a tiny fractional difference in engine efficiency.
Sure.
Like she's prepared to abort the entire mission, which would cost billions upon billions of dollars, because it cannot be unpredictable, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, and it's great because a moment like that both totally serves the theme of the movie and the sort of ideas that it's trying to get across, and perfectly sets up plot wise, right? Because like, why was there an engine inefficiency? Because there was an extra human being on the ship that was not accounted for, and that produced just that fraction amount of drag, which jeopardized their ability to get to the MTS. So love that, man. And that was something that was really pleasing. Would have been, I think, really, really pleasing to see on the second time through. But, on the first time through, having seen the preview, knowing that there was a stowaway, I was like, oh, it's because there's a stowaway. Oh my gosh. I felt so smart as the audience. Anyway.
And then I think I remember the ship is called the USS Stowaway. So the fact that no one saw it coming is crazy. For my final thought, I just want to re-up something that Jordan said in the very beginning, which was my favorite part of this movie, is that there's no real villains. Yeah, they're all honorable, smart, beautiful, compassionate people. Some are a little bit more practical or pragmatic than others, but there's just no, I keep going back to the Abyss. I don't know why, but like there's no Lieutenant Coffee. There's no person that just can't handle it, because then it's such a straight arrow to defeat that. And instead you just have to put your feet down and your hands in the air. I don't know what the phrase is, but put your head forward and solve the problem, work the problem and figure it out. It's really refreshing, especially in a space movie where, Interstellar, Matt Damon had the space crazies. There's so many space crazies movies. It's nice to have the villain is space.
Yeah.
Gravity would probably be the closest comparison as far as, they're just dealing with, actual space craziness.
Right. You don't need a person to sabotage things.
Exactly.
Like reality will sabotage you plenty.
Exactly.
And I think that's, nothing against space crazies narratives.
No,
I loved the movie Sunshine.
Oh,
yeah, I brought that up earlier. I agree.
Yeah.
And I think Event Horizon is like a horrifying movie. And it's all about space crazy, and it's really effective. Like, nothing against those narratives, but like you certainly don't need to use that narrative. And it is incredibly refreshing to see the rigor with which they bring this kind of story to life and say, there's plenty to work with in reality. Let's just respect it, research it, and bring it to life.
Agreed. Those are my thoughts now. I said that. that was all Tommy Metz III.
Well, it was very exciting for me to see. Joe Penna certainly is somebody I want to see more of. He got to start. I brought up his AKA Mystery Guitar Man. That's where he started on YouTube.
Yeah, what's that?
In the early days, he was a YouTube sensation back in the early days.
Playing
from
the guitar?
I don't know. He just did all sorts of videos, and he was like back in the early, like the aughts. He was very, very popular, and then slowly started shifting into. He's from Brazil and started shifting into some film projects, and then but it wasn't
Seems
until
like he's
Arctic
directed
a couple years ago.
Shorts, right? I thought I saw on his IMDb he has like 900,000 shorts.
That seems like a lot of shorts.
He was making one a day. They're about 1 minute long. They're not great. They're like, I'm on my way to the toaster, almost there. It's a very real time thing.
It was an iterative process.
Yeah,
right. I don't know if any of the YouTube stuff ends up, but I mean, he's got millions of followers there, and he just started doing all sorts of making of videos and stuff. So who knows? I don't know where it all.
Absolutely, someone that I would love to see more from.
Yeah, and now I really want to go back and see Arctic and like think about it as a possible, first
I haven't seen
Mars
it.
Journey.
I love Mads Mikkelsen, so I feel kind of dumb for having missed that one. Also, one quick note. I guess this is not really a note about the movie. It's more of it's a note about Joe Penna and kind of a meta note about creativity and filmmaking. Like, this really is something, like, we do live in an age where, an era where people can make stuff for way less cost and headache and hassle. I mean, it's so low of an investment to make things now than it used to be. The people who take advantage of that, like, they're going to eclipse the people who don't. And you can tell the guys who go out there and are like, I really want to make a first movie, and they haven't made anything. And then they go make a first movie and it's just not very good. And then you can tell the guys who have been out there just working, just like learning the craft, just by iteration, just over and over and over and over. And it shows in the work. When a movie like this, gets made, and you see it and you're like, wow, it's so, it has such great economy. It's so smart. It's so whatever. It's like, that didn't happen just because he's so like brilliant naturally. It happened because he's practiced as an artist, as craft for a long time. And so, he knows how to do it. He's learned it. I just want to kind of hats off for people who are willing to put in the work.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And hopefully it's a continuation of our drawing back from that, obsession of making music video directors and throwing huge things, because for every David Fincher we have 900 whoever directed Swordfish. Like, they're great at the visuals, but then story, character, all of that nuance, all of that is completely destroyed. So it's great, because if you have to start small, a lot of this movie in a way could be a play.
Absolutely. Yeah, totally could. Right.
If you take the spacewalk out of it, this could be a play and a real, well, I guess we've been saying the word morality play over and over again. And that's so important. That's the real, from there comes then, that's where you put the icing on. You don't start it. You don't start with the icing and then try to build the cake. Oh boy, what a phrase maker. Okay.
No, very true.
I mean, if it's good enough icing.
That's right.
That's true. Actually, for most people,
had Swiss buttercream. Oh my god.
Oh, yeah. I throw that red velvet in the trash.
I mean, I think that this movie is definitely something that's got to be worth watching and spending more time with and just kind of getting a sense of. So I'm really thrilled that we got a chance to talk about it, guys. So Letterboxd, out of 5 stars, where would you guys land with this? And would you give it the famous Letterboxd heart or not?
Oh, so exciting.
Tommy, where are you going to land with this one? Yeah.
Because I just watched it, I might lower it a little bit later, because once you sort of know everything that's there, there's not a ton of there. It's a very small story, but maybe that's a good thing. I'm going to say 4 points. Stars? What are we doing? 4 letterboxes. I'm going to give it 4 podcasts.
How many stowaways are you gonna put on it?
Yeah, I'm going to give it 4 stowaways.
How many stowaways will you bolt into its walls?
Yeah. I would say like 3.75, but that doesn't seem to be an option. So I'm going to say 4.
Okay.
And it has
yes,
my heart.
Okay.
Is this out of, what is this?
Out of 5? Yeah, out of 5 stars. Yeah.
Well, first, before I'm going to be annoying and rude and say one more thing about the movie.
Of course,
sure.
There was a bunch of times where I was like, oh, they've been out there for so long. Would the Earth still really be so big? And I had to like accept that it would. And then at the very end, and I love this, at the very end when she's sitting there and we're hearing that dumb monologue and you see Mars.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh man. Yeah.
Right.
They would see Earth just getting smaller and Mars getting a little bigger. And like they would literally see that the whole time. And I got like, my heart kind of broke open at that point. I was like, really, like that's awesome. It was a really profound moment. And I like, once again, a very bold, very spare, very authentic choice and like very effective. How many Michaels will I bolt into the the walls of the show?
Nice.
How many Michaels?
I would say, I think I'm gonna. Can we do halvesies?
You can.
I'm gonna say 3.5.
I like it
because I would need to. I need to go back and see it again before I'd feel confident giving it like a solid 4 or above. But
sure, yeah.
But I mean, it really earned every single half of those hearts. So
And would you give it a heart too? The Letterboxd has these the star
It
rating,
just
and
means
then you
like
give it a
or
heart.
not.
Like, yeah,
I think you would give it a
man.
like.
ratings are so dumb, guys.
I know. I know.
You know what we did for the last hour and a half? We gave it a rating. Like, this is arbitrary numbers. What is this?
I know.
Yeah, no, I like it. I like it. Absolutely, I like it. Yeah,
Yeah.
give it a heart.
Because
for sure.
Jordan got to say something last. I want to say something last. Is at one point, because I've spent most of my time during COVID in my apartment talking to my dog. I played at one point Jeff, who was the name of the character that Toni Collette is talking to from Hyperion, because you never hear anything.
Right.
It's really cool about the isolation that they do. You never hear the other side. You just hear, and so every once in a while, when she'd be like, "You have to tell me some good news," and I'd be like, "I don't know, In-N-Out's coming. Like, we're doing our best." Like, I would add in what Jeff's thinks, or he'd be like, "There's so much air. Go into that next compartment. Why aren't you listening?" She's like, "That's not an option." I'm like, "Girl, the closet is right there." So that's a fun skit that you could do.
So what I'm getting from this is that you'd be really fun to watch movies with.
Yes, as long as everyone's drunk.
That's right.
Yes.
Well, I think that it's a.
What's it going to be?
I know. I think I'm landing at 3.5. Also, with a heart. It's it's a film that I think could easily go up to 4. I think that for me the pace was a little slow, but I was very into everything that was going on, and I think down the road thinking about it, I would remember the pace and I go, it's a slower one to sit through, but in the end, I think I'd still be happy with it. But I think that's going to keep me a wall up for it. So I'm going to say 3.5.
It's interesting you say that, because on this go around, I called it patient.
Yeah.
But yes, it's 20 minutes before the first inciting incident.
Yeah, right.
Before Stowaway Magoo falls through the thing. And after, before that, it's just sort of like a real time, walking around a ship. So that's an interesting point. So where does that leave us? Yeah,
it leaves it at 3 and 2/3 is where we'll sit. So, that will round that.
That's a bad decimal. From what I remember I know. In algebra.
It is. We're going to round it down to 3.5 and a heart. And, I think that's fine. I think that's a great place for this film. It's a really interesting film. Definitely worth talking about. Had a great time talking with the two of you about it. Thanks so much for joining me tonight to talk about it.
My pleasure, Jordan.
Yeah, likewise. I said
it was my pleasure first.
Well, you did. I was waiting for you.
Well, everybody, don't forget to join our online community with fellow movie lovers. You can learn more at thenextreel.com/discord. And if you're interested in supporting us to help keep the lights on and get some great benefits while you're at it, head to thenextreel.com/membership. Thanks for joining us here on the Film Board. Meeting adjourned.